I'm Mayk. Welcome to Battleground Politics. This year's battle over Pennsylvania's budget finally came to an end this month. Lawmakers agreed on a spending plan more than 4 months behind schedule. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro put his signature on the budget shortly after it passed through the divided legislature. It allowed billions of dollars to start flowing to critical organizations across the Commonwealth. But the governor will have to propose his next budget a few months from now.
I said at the outset of this budget process that I was absolutely certain about one thing that would be in the final budget document, and that is compromise. That it would show that everyone was going to have to give a little bit and understand the perspectives of others in order to deliver a whole lot for the people of Pennsylvania.
Joining us now in studio is Pennsylvania State Representative Jordan Harris. He's a Democrat representing parts of Philadelphia, and he is also the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's talk about this budget. It got done. It finally got done. Why did it take so long to get here?
I like how you said finally got done.
Yeah, well, it took a while.
So it did. The governor did his budget address back in February, and through that time, through budget hearings and through negotiations, we began to work on a document that we would feel represented Pennsylvania's values. And look, we do have a divided government. You have a governor that's a Democrat, a House that's controlled by us, the Democratic Party, and then you have my colleagues over in the Republican Party who control the Senate. And so that does mean that we have to find consensus to get a document done. And, you know, sometimes, unfortunately, it does take a little bit of time. But what I can tell you is that the document that we came out with, this budget, I do believe really reflects the values of Pennsylvania.
I heard someone in leadership on the Senate side say that it was worth the wait. Do you feel that way?
I do. I mean, so we've been very focused on several things in our caucus. One at the top being education. We know that we have an education mandate from the Commonwealth Court that says how we fund education is unconstitutional, and we needed to fix that. This budget gives us the second installment of resources to get us to a better place where we're funding education in the way that we are constitutionally required to. Just think about it this way. For Philadelphia, that means about $193 million new dollars on top of the more than 220-something million that was in last year's budget. For folks like the William Penn School District, that's about a 22% increase over last year's budget. When you look at Norristown and school districts around that have been underfunded for so long, those school districts are getting the resources that they so desperately need. And that means more teachers, nurses, counselors. That means infrastructure funding for those schools so that our students aren't going to schools with asbestos. There's real tangible gets behind the dollars and cents.
For so much of this debate, conversation for months, and especially through the summer, SEPTA and money for transit was really a big focus, certainly in this area for folks who depend on it, and also in Harrisburg, I know for a lot of Democrats pushing for it. It was taken out of the conversation for this sort of last phase of the negotiations. Do you ultimately think it was the right thing to do to sort of move beyond that and not have that be the sticking point, the breaking point?
Yeah, if there's one thing that I regret that I would say is left undone, it is mass transit funding. Folks in Harrisburg need to understand that Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Agency Authority, SEPTA, is the economic engine for the state. More than 40% of the revenue for the state comes from this region.
So why did it end up not being the deal breaker?
Well, you know, it was known that this was something that my Republican colleagues wanted to deal. They needed to get revenue in the area of skill games. They weren't able to get skill games done, and therefore mass transit wasn't included. But let me be very clear. Mass transit remains at a top priority for our caucus. It is something that we must do. It is not an option for us. And although there is a temporary fix, we cannot, should not, and will not continue to kick the can down the road. It must happen.
So what does this look like next year? Is it just a repeat? Do you have a different approach? Why would it be any different?
We're not gonna let up on our advocacy around mass transit funding and getting folks in other parts of the state to understand why mass transit should be important to them. Listen, folks try to make this an urban versus rural Pennsylvania discussion, but it's not. SEPTA, PRT in the West, LANTA in the Northeast, these agencies help with the economy of our Commonwealth. It gets people to work, it gets kids to schools, it gets folks to their doctor's appointments. It is the lifeblood of our economy. And it is that economy that also funds roads and bridges in rural parts of Pennsylvania that many of your viewers will never see. And so we need to continue to do the job of educating folks throughout the Commonwealth and keeping the pressure on those folks who represent those areas to let them know SEPTA is not just about southeastern Pennsylvania. It's not just about folks in Philadelphia and the counties that surround it. But SEPTA, PRT, LANTA, and all of the other transit agencies fuel the economy of this Commonwealth.
And the sort of solution that SEPTA is using now, there is a time limit on that. It doesn't last forever. It's a 2-year situation. But why do you think that there's any more of a chance of something getting done next year than there was this year?
Well, there's a lot going on next year. You have America 250. Why
would that help?
Well, I think the transportation of people from all across this world and seeing how many people are coming to this area to celebrate the birthplace of this nation.
Wouldn't this year, though, have been the pressure point for that?
You would have thought it was, but there's a lot going on next year that I think will remind people of why transportation is included or important. So next year, there's also a lot of other pressure points that I think are going to be happening in November of next year that will keep people on their toes about why they should care about this. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to people in communities reminding their elected officials who may not represent the city, but may represent outside the city and other parts of the Commonwealth, that mass transit is important to them as well, because they have to get to the doctor, they have to get their kids to school, and they have to get to work.
You mentioned skill games. That was something, as I talked to people that's regulating these games that people might see in bars or restaurants or corner stores. It is something that, as I talked to your colleagues in Harrisburg, most people I talked to were optimistic that it could get done in terms of regulating that and getting some money from it, but it didn't get done. Why do you think it didn't?
Well, look, skill games is something for us that we waited on the state Senate to send us a bill. There were 2 revenue generators in the budget. It was the legalization of adult use cannabis and skill games that were part of the governor's proposal. The House passed a legalization of marijuana bill over to the state Senate. They did not take that piece of legislation up, nor did they send us their own. And we're still waiting on them to send us something to regulate skill games. The bottom line for us is that these games are in our communities, and right now they're unregulated and they're untaxed. And that means that there are resources being left on the table that could fund mass transit and could fund other things that we need done in this Commonwealth. So we look forward to the Senate to send us something.
Could you start it in the House?
We look forward to the Senate to send us something.
Why does the Senate have to do it?
Well, because this is what they said they wanted to do, and so we're looking for the state Senate to take up skill games and send us a piece of legislation to deal with it.
Let me ask you about sort of what happens now. You've passed this budget. You're the chair of Appropriations, and there was this period of time where money was just not going out. What is happening now, and how quickly is that money getting out to places that have been waiting on it?
Oh, absolutely. So our budget office has been working overtime to get money to counties and to nonprofits and to school districts now that the budget is passed. And quite honestly, within a matter of days, if they haven't, many of those agencies and departments should be receiving their allotments that they were missing. And here's the other thing. Agencies aren't the only ones that are going to be receiving money out of this budget. We passed something in this budget called Working Pennsylvania Tax Credit, which is a huge thing. I mean, if you qualify right now at the federal level for the Earned Income Tax Credit, you'll now qualify for another tax credit that will put real money back into your pockets. For those who qualify with one child, it's around $400. Two, it's $700. Three or more children, it's $800. Now you pair that with what we did in last year's budget with the child independent tax credit. That's real tangible money that's going back into the pockets of people in Pennsylvania. As we see rising costs across this country, we wanted to pass something that's going to put money right back into their pockets. So not only do you have the child dependent tax credit from last year's budget, now you have the working Pennsylvania tax credit that's going to be real tangible dollars going back to Pennsylvanians. Over 800,000 of them will see this money.
Folks may hear that and say, hey, that sounds great. How do I get a piece of it? What are they going to actually need to do in order to get that?
File your taxes.
Okay.
The same way you file your state and federal taxes. If you qualify, you'll receive these additional resources in your refund. And that's why this budget is good. Not only did we do education funding, not only did we do the Work in Pennsylvania tax credit, but we've done, there's a lot of other things in this budget that's going to benefit Philadelphia. One thing, a couple weeks ago, I stood on the campus of CCP. And I talked about this new partnership between CCP and Cheyney University, where students will be able to graduate from CCP with an associate's degree, and then at CCP, go to Cheyney University and get their bachelor's degree from Cheyney University without having to leave Philadelphia. Well, in this budget, there's $5 million to support that partnership. Let me tell you what that means, Lauren. That means that there's going to be those who get the Octavius Catto Scholarship in Philadelphia where they don't have to pay for CCP. They'll now actually be able to go to Cheyney University and get scholarship dollars and not have to pay for Cheyney either. That's a 4-year degree that you'll be able to get here in Philadelphia for free. These are the other things that are also baked into this budget that help people. There's money in the budget to build affordable housing. And I'm sure in the next few days, you'll hear from our mayor to talk about a change to the tax code, tax credit that we did at the state level that's going to help the city of Philadelphia convert commercial properties into residential properties to build on our affordable housing portfolio. So there's a lot really in this budget that moves Philadelphia forward, that moves the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania forward. And that's why, while it did take us a long time to get here, it is a good budget for this Commonwealth.
How is that going to work, the partnership with the city on that? How is that going to work?
Oh, well, the city's going to have, the mayor has her plan for 30,000 new units here in Philadelphia. Well, this tax credit that we did at the state level will now make it more attractive to get investment, to convert from commercial to residential. As you know, and many folks watching know, post-pandemic we've had now this large amount of commercial property here in the city of Philadelphia that if we could just convert it to residential, we could get more affordable units onto the rolls for people to purchase. You could get more people into those homes, but we need an incentive to make those things happen, and we put that in the state budget as well to help the city of Philadelphia do just that.
Before we run out of time, I also wanted to ask you about something that it's not a dollars and cents thing in the budget, but it was part of the agreement, which involves something called RGGI. It's a term people have heard tossed around, Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Yeah. It's an emissions initiative that a number of states are part of, and Governor Wolf had moved to put Pennsylvania in it. It's been held up in the courts, but Pennsylvania will now not be part of this. Some environmental groups are not happy about that move. They wanted Pennsylvania to be part of this initiative. What do you think the impact of not having Pennsylvania in that will be?
Well, I share the concerns that my environmental friends do around climate change and around what all of this means for Pennsylvania in an environmental sense. And what we have to do, working with the administration and working with the governors, Pennsylvania has to have its own plan on what we're going to do to deal with what we know is a real issue in climate change. And so we're working with the governor to have a plan in PA that we know we can work. I mean, Reggie.
What's the next step on that?
Well, the governor is moving forward on that. I mean, what we know is that, Reggie has been tied up in the courts since Governor Wolf got us in it. So there hasn't been any benefit to Pennsylvania because of that. And so we're looking ahead to working with the governor to come up with a plan that works, that will move Pennsylvania in the right direction on how we address our environment and address climate change.
We're heading into 2026. Midterms will get a lot of attention on the federal level, but there's elections on the state level as well. Given what residents in Pennsylvania saw out of Harrisburg and how long this took and what this process looked like, as you mentioned, there's divided government. Why should voters keep Democrats in control of the House? Because
we continue to deliver. When you look at the budgets that we've passed since we've controlled the House, we've delivered on the promises that we made. We talked about making sure that we fund our children's education, not just because it's the nice thing to say, but because it matters. Looking a child in the eye and telling them that education is the elevator out of poverty and then giving them a broken elevator is just hypocrisy. And for far too long, folks have been able to get away with doing that. And so when you look at what we've done with regards to education funding, we've done just that. We've put the money where it needs to go into the school districts that it needs to go to. When we talk about putting money back into the pockets of Pennsylvanians, we've done just that. Whether it's the child dependent tax credit, whether it's increasing the income on rent rebates, whether it's the working Pennsylvania tax credit, we've done just that to put money back into the pockets of the people of Pennsylvania. When we talk about affordable housing and putting the money over into the FAIR program to do that, we've done those things. And so we've held tight to do those things while pushing back on the negative things that we've seen coming out of Washington, D.C. Many Pennsylvanians have been scared about what's happening now in health care. Well, if you look into this budget, we've put a significant amount of money into our managed care program so that we could keep people, our most vulnerable, on their health care and making sure that they get their health care. When you talk about the food cuts that we've seen out of Washington, D.C., well, at this state budget, we've put more money into our food programs to make sure that that money is going out to food pantries, to churches, to community organizations that make sure that people in this Commonwealth eat. So when you ask why we should keep Democrats in control of the House and in the governor's mansion and moving forward, it's because we don't just make promises. We deliver on what we say.
Representative Jordan Harris and chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, thanks for your time. Good to talk to you. Let's go across the aisle now and get the Republican perspective. State Senator Tracy Pennycuick represents parts of Berks and Montgomery counties, and she is a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you, Senator.
Thanks for having me.
So there seem to be things people on both sides of the aisle are happy about in this budget bill. Did it have to take this long then, if people are so happy with it?
I think it did have to take this long because I think it took time for people to realize that we were going to be putting our constituents in serious debt if we didn't claw back some money from state agencies from previous budgets where they hadn't spent money, where we had to slash some overspending, if you will. So I think it did take some time, but I think the product is really a good bipartisan product.
What do you think ultimately did break through and get to the end here? You and I talked sort of in the middle of the process, but what do you think brought it to its end?
I honestly think when all four caucuses and the governor sat down together in the same room, I think that's when it really got real for everybody. And I think you couldn't do the he said, she said. I think you had to say, look at one another and say, all right, it's time for real negotiations. Let's get down to brass tacks. I think that's what it took.
Is that something that you think will be a model going forward to avoid something like this again?
Yep. I think that we are a divided government. I think it's really important that we have everyone at the table, both majority and minority leaders, as well as the governor, in one room getting it done. Absolutely.
What do you think could be done, though, to protect schools and pre-Ks, places that really suffered during this, had to borrow money or just go without certain things? Is there anything that could be done to prevent a negative impact on them if this does happen again and we are, waiting for months?
So absolutely. I think what we need to do is we need to, and the Senate Republicans did this in August, pass last year's budget so there isn't a delay in that money getting out to schools and pre-K programs so that they are not putting themselves at financial risk. That's most important. And then let the legislature hash out the little couple of $1 billion that's left. What's really, really important is we continue to fund our schools and our pre-K programs and our senior programs. We cannot delay that. I'd love to say, hey, as soon as the governor's budget address is done, boom, get to work. But they are getting to work. So we've got to be work harder, longer, over the weekend so that we can hit that June 30th deadline.
So are you saying both chambers should basically pass the same budget they had before
Yes.
afterwards? I mean, what's the incentive then to keep negotiating? Couldn't somebody just say, well, you've got a budget, we'll just stop?
You know, I hope that both sides would be professional enough to recognize that that's not serving the constituents of Pennsylvania. And that's what we're elected to do, is to serve every constituent in Pennsylvania. So I would hope that that would not happen. And I would hope that in good faith, people would say, look, we want to get the money out. We're still in disagreement on a few issues, and we're going to iron those out. And this budget's a good indication of where we're at. Everyone compromised. Not one person said, woo, best budget ever. Everyone recognized that it was a compromised budget, but everyone came away with wins. And I think that is so positive, and it shows that we can work together, and it shows that we can compromise, and that we can get a good budget that's good for every Pennsylvanian.
I wanted to ask you about a couple of specific things. There were some changes for cyber charters in here, and I know you were involved with some accountability reforms.
Yes.
This also has financial implications for them as well. What do you think the impacts of the changes in this budget will mean for cyber charters and families who use them?
So I'm a huge school choice advocate. I think it's really important. But with that choice becomes responsibility. And that's why I really wanted to see the wellness checks, the truancy reform, the residency requirements. We can't have students that are abusing the system or not showing up for school for 40 days before it's reported. It's really important that if they are enrolled in cyber charter school, that they are being checked on by their teachers. Unfortunately, we've lost 2 students in the state of Pennsylvania that were enrolled in cyber charter schools that were being abused by their parents. We need to have that outside entity making sure those kids are safe. So that was the intent. I honestly, most of the charter schools had no issues with those reforms. Additionally, I think we need to do even a better job. I would love to see cyber charter funding pulled out of local schools and put under a different division under the Department of Education, because local schools have to figure out their budgets. And when they don't know what they're going to be spending on cyber charter, it makes it very uncertain for them to budget and to plan. So I would love to see the funding piece pulled out, put under the Department of Education, and let them manage those students.
We spent a lot of time, and I say we, meaning just the region and the state, spent a lot of time during this process thinking about and talking about transit and SEPTA.
Yep.
You and I talked about it during this process. There was no recurring funding for transit or for SEPTA in this budget, and there was a sort of temporary solution put in place for SEPTA, taking money out of a capital fund during this process. What do you think the future of recurring funding is for SEPTA in Harrisburg?
So I think that you're going to see reoccurring funding either come through skill games or some other initiatives that we're working on that aren't quite ready for prime time. We want to see SEPTA have reoccurring funding, but with that funding also comes the responsibility of operating responsibly and efficiently and using every dollar to the maximum effectiveness possible while keeping their employees safe. That is the number one thing. Their employees and riders have to be safe on SEPTA. So we're continuing to work on funding for SEPTA and the other public transportation systems in Pittsburgh and up in Lehigh Valley. So we're working on it. We didn't get it done in this budget, unfortunately, but we are close. We've got some other solutions that are coming down the pike.
What makes you feel like it could get done? Because there were people who thought it could get done this year.
I never knew skill games could be so complicated, but I now know skill games is very complicated, and there's a lot of different players that are
regulating skill games and getting revenue out of them.
Regulating skill games and taxing skill games. So I think that we're continuing conversations. We're looking at the entire landscape of the video games, online gaming, small games of chance, we're looking at all of that as a mechanism, once regulated, to put into public transportation. So hopefully that will be a reoccurring funding stream.
Yeah, I mean, why didn't that get done? When I talked to I asked the appropriations chair in the House about skill games, and he put it on the Senate that they didn't send anything over. You're in the Senate. Why did the Senate not send anything over?
I think there's 4 at this point different bills regulating and taxing skill games. And I think the problem is we can't seem to come to an agreement on what each terminal is going to cost, what each operator's license is going to cost, and what the tax rate is. And once we get there, I think we're going to be in a much better position. But you got to remember, a lot of these skill games are in our small fire stations and our nonprofits like the VFW, the American Legion. We don't want to tax those small nonprofits out of existence. We want to make sure that they continue to operate. So we have to look at the whole picture of skill games, not just a terminal in a convenience store. We have to look at also the nonprofit landscape. We have to look at those parlors that want to have 20 or 30 different games in one location. So it's a lot bigger than just quote unquote skill games. It's looking at who has them, where they have them, what is a reasonable registration fee or license fee without, putting people out of business. We don't want to stop small businesses from, using skill games to kind of bring them over the top to profitability. We want to make sure that we're taking care of and protecting our small businesses.
Once you come to an agreement, if you come to an agreement on skill games, do you designate that money for transit and for SEPTA and other transit agencies, or are other interests going to want a piece of that?
That I don't know. It's still a negotiation.
What do you think should happen?
I think it should go not only to SEPTA, but also to roads and bridges. I think that's the reality. It has to be for both. We can't just say it's going to be for public transportation when, 80% of our state doesn't have a public transportation system, but is covered with roads and bridges. So I think it's got to be a balance between public transportation as well as roads and bridges.
Okay. One of the things that was part of the sort of larger agreement, though not dollars and cents in the budget, was the future of RGGI, the future of the regional greenhouse gas initiative, and Pennsylvania not being part of that. But the governor has also talked about Pennsylvania sort of having its own system regarding emissions. What do you see as the future in that area? Do you think that Pennsylvania could put something of its own in place?
So I think getting out of RGGI, I think was very smart. A cap and trade for a state that produces so much natural gas and fossil fuels is ridiculous. We are all already incredibly efficient in our carbon emissions. It would also have increased everyone's electric bill by 30%. I don't think anyone right now.
What is that? What are you basing that on?
Just because it's a cap and trade. So you're paying for the emission of your carbon footprint. So you're paying a tax to have electricity, and you're paying that tax to 13 states that we're doing better than them, and we're not even in the RGGI as of right now. So I think getting out of that is really important. A lot of trade unions didn't want to see it. They thought it would stifle our economy. I think it was smart to do. Do we need to be looking at how we can be very aware of our impact on the environment? Absolutely. But I think we need to do what's best for Pennsylvanians and not look to jump onto something that is with other states that have different priorities and different landscapes.
Do you think there is an appetite for building something for Pennsylvania?
I think there is. I do.
There was also in this budget a new tax credit, I think that's being referred to as a working Pennsylvanians tax credit.
Yep.
What do you think the impact of that will be? And do you think that that's a worthwhile investment?
I think it's a really worthwhile investment. So what it does is it takes the federal level earned income tax credit, and it takes a percentage of that so that Pennsylvania family will get that back. So you can get up to $800 back a year. That's huge. for a working family, especially if they've got little kids in daycare. I think that's really important to put money back in the pockets of working Pennsylvanians. They deserve it. They're working hard. I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful that we're recognizing working families and helping them, giving them a little bit of a leg up.
As you finish out this budget season, you are also on the cusp of another budget season. Did you, and you'll be going into that as a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, did you learn anything from this process? We talked about at the beginning of this having everybody in the room together, but are there other steps that you are going to take? You're not a member of leadership, you're a member of the Appropriations Committee. Are there other steps you're going to take to help speed things up?
There's a lot of different things that I plan on doing. And one of them is to look back over the years prior testimony from the different departments and ask follow-up questions. You asked for 15 new positions. Did you fill those 15 new positions? And if you didn't, how did that affect your mission? Because maybe you didn't need those 15 new positions. And Appropriations did an interesting thing this year. They call it rebasing, where they looked at what they had spent over the last 5 years and said, actually, you budget for $10 million, but you really only spend $7 million. So we're going to rebase you down to $7 million as your base number in the budget. And I think that's really important because as Pennsylvanians are struggling to pay their bills, government should also tighten their belt. We should not be putting increased pressure on Pennsylvanians, whether it be seniors, whether it be young families or business. We need to tighten our belts in the government, and we can do that, I think, a lot more than we have been doing. And I think that's where we need to start, is looking at what we can cut, where we can save, economies of scale. Absolutely. That's the first priority.
Next year is an election year. There is divided government in Harrisburg. What is the argument for voters to keep Republicans in control of the Senate?
Well, I think it's really important that we look at what we've done. We have made sure that Pennsylvanians are not being taxed. We haven't increased the taxes. I think that's really, really important. But we've continued to increase monies to fund our schools. We just had a 7% increase in funding for our libraries, another $10 million to our aging agencies. That's really important. I believe it's over $500 million to those direct care workers for our vulnerable. That's really important as well. I think what we are doing is being very fiscally responsible, but putting money into programs that enhance the lives of Pennsylvanians. And I think that's why you want to keep the Republicans in the Senate, in the majority, because we are that kind of voice of reason, the common sense approach.
State Senator Tracy Pennycuick, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Have a great day.
That does it for this episode of Battleground Politics. You can hear more of my interviews with public officials, candidates, political insiders, and voters by subscribing to my Battleground Politics podcast. Past episodes are streaming right now on NBC10.com, the NBC10 app, our NBC Philadelphia YouTube page, or you can listen while on the go, wherever you get your podcasts.